All right, so we're diving in today to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
A classic.
You've given us an audiobook excerpt
Ah.
and some really interesting quotes.
Yeah.
So clearly you're looking to get something specific out of revisiting this, maybe a fresh perspective,
Yeah.
or are you thinking about how to actually put these habits into practice in your own life? What's the mission here?
I think one of the reasons Covey's work has become such a classic is because
Yeah.
it's not just another self-help book.
Right.
It's more about uncovering these universal principles that apply to pretty much any part of life.
Yeah.
Whether it's your career relationships or personal growth.
Totally. And speaking of those universal principles,
Yeah.
one of the things that jumped out at me from the audiobook was that idea of paradigms.
Right.
Covey uses that classic optical illusion example.
Yes.
The one where you can see either a young woman or an old woman in the same image,
Right.
depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
What's so cool about that
Yeah.
is it highlights how two people can be looking at the exact same thing but see something totally different.
That's a brilliant way to illustrate how our perception shapes our reality.
Yeah.
Covey argues that real change
Mm-hmm.
doesn't come from just tweaking our behavior.
Right.
It's about shifting those deep-seated
Yeah.
mental maps, those paradigms that we use to interpret the world.
It's an inside-out approach.
That's right.
It reminds me of that quote you sent over. The problem is not out there. The problem is the way we're looking at it.
Yeah.
So much of our effectiveness or lack thereof boils down to our perspective.
Yeah, and speaking of perspective,
Yeah.
that leads us right into habit 1, be proactive.
Okay.
The audiobook told that story about the man on the subway
Right.
whose kids were being disruptive, and it turned out they had just lost their mother.
Yeah.
Such a powerful reminder
Mm-hmm.
that we often judge others based on our own limited understanding.
That story really stuck with me. I know I'm guilty of jumping to conclusions sometimes without fully understanding the situation. So being proactive is more than just taking initiative, right?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that no matter what
Yeah.
life throws our way,
Yeah.
we always have a choice in how we respond.
Right.
We're not just reacting to circumstances. We have the power to choose our response.
Okay.
As Covey says, our behavior is a function of our decisions, not our conditions.
That's so empowering.
It is.
It reminds me of the quote, I am not a product of my circumstances. I am a product of my decisions.
Yes.
It really puts the responsibility and the power back in our own hands.
And I think we can all relate to
Yeah.
feeling stuck in reactive patterns sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So think about your own life right now.
Yeah.
Where do you feel most reactive?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's at work in a particular relationship.
Yeah.
Or even in how you manage your time.
Right.
What would it look like to shift to a more proactive mindset in that area?
That's a great question for all of us to consider. It's easy to get caught up in just reacting to the day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
But this reminds us that we have the power to create change.
That's right.
Now on to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Covey uses that powerful analogy of a funeral to drive this point home, doesn't he?
It's certainly a thought-provoking image.
Yeah.
He asks us to imagine attending our own funeral
Right.
and think about what we would want people to say about us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to confront what truly matters,
Right.
our definition of success,
Yeah.
and make sure we're not just chasing someone else's version of it.
It's like a gut check on our values, right? It's
Yeah.
so easy to get caught up in the daily grind and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly.
And that's where creating a personal mission statement comes in, which Covey talks about a lot. It's like our compass to make sure we're headed in the right direction.
Exactly, and it's not a one-and-done thing either.
Right.
It's something to revisit and refine as we grow and evolve.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes from the materials you shared is, if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster.
Ooh, I like that one.
It highlights the importance of having that clear vision.
So true. What resonated with you about the concept of a mission statement when you first encountered it? Was it something you immediately connected with, or did it take time to create one that felt authentic to you?
It definitely resonated with me, but it was a process.
Yeah.
It required some serious soul-searching and reflection to articulate my core values and what I wanted my life to stand for.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for a lot of people. It's not always an easy process, but it's so valuable to have that guiding document.
Right.
And speaking of guiding documents,
Yes.
Covey gives us another one in habit 3. Put first things first with that brilliant time management matrix.
The urgent important matrix. It's such a simple yet powerful tool.
Oh, it's so...
It helps us visualize where we're spending our time and energy
Mhm.
and whether it's aligned with our priorities.
It's so easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of urgent tasks, but so often those aren't the things that truly matter in the long run.
You're absolutely right. Covey emphasizes the importance of quadrant 2,
Yeah.
activities that are important but not urgent.
Right.
These are things like planning, relationship building,
Yeah.
personal development, the things that often get pushed aside when we're in reactive mode.
And those are the things that ultimately help us achieve our goals and live fulfilling lives.
They are.
There's a quote from the materials that perfectly sums this up. Effective people are not problem-minded. They're opportunity-minded. They feed opportunities and starve problems.
Love it.
It's a shift in perspective, isn't it?
It is.
Instead of just reacting to problems, we're proactively creating opportunities.
And that takes discipline.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another important aspect of Covey's work.
Yeah.
The emphasis on principles and character.
It's what sets his work apart from just surface-level self-help, right? It's not just about quick fixes or hacks. It's about building a solid foundation of character.
That's right. He uses the analogy of cramming on a farm.
Okay.
You can't just show up in the fall
Yeah.
and expect a bountiful harvest.
Right.
If you haven't put in the work all spring and summer, planting seeds, tending the soil, nurturing the plants.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
We can't just expect to suddenly become effective overnight. It takes consistent effort, just like growing a garden.
And character is built through our daily choices. Our habits, our responses to challenges.
Right.
It's about aligning our actions with our values and principles.
There's another quote you sent over that's really relevant here. Sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny.
Yeah, that's a great one.
It beautifully illustrates how our choices over time shape who we become and what we create in our lives.
And this is where Covey goes beyond just individual effectiveness.
Okay.
He emphasizes that true success is not just about achieving our own goals,
Right.
but about our ability to connect, collaborate, and create synergy with others.
Yeah.
He introduces this concept of interdependence,
Okay.
that we are all interconnected and that our greatest achievements often require working together.
So it's not just about being a lone wolf out there, right? It's about understanding how our actions impact others and how we can work together to achieve something greater than we could on our own.
Exactly. And he goes on to talk about the remaining habits. Think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood and synergize.
Right.
All of which build on this foundation of interdependence.
And that makes perfect sense. If we want to create truly effective relationships and teams, we need to move beyond just focusing on our own needs and desires. So before we dive into those next habits, let's take a moment to reflect. Thinking about your own life, what are some areas where collaboration and interdependence are crucial to your success?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And what comes to mind when you think about your own ability to collaborate effectively?
That's a really insightful question.
Yeah.
We often focus so much on individual achievement that we forget the power of collective effort.
Okay, now let's jump into habit 4. Think win-win.
Okay.
The audiobook shares that story about a sales associate who walked away from a big contract because the terms just weren't beneficial for both parties in the long run.
Right.
It was such a great example of having the courage to stick to your principles, even when it means potentially losing out in the short term.
It's a perfect illustration of what Covey means by principle-centered negotiation.
Yeah.
Thinking win-win isn't about being weak or compromising.
Right.
It's about finding solutions that genuinely benefit everyone involved. It's about creating value rather than just claiming it.
It's about abundance, not scarcity.
Exactly.
Like instead of seeing it as a fixed pie where someone has to lose for someone else to win, it's about finding ways to expand the pie so everyone can benefit.
Exactly. And that requires a shift in mindset from competition to collaboration.
And that leads perfectly into habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. The audiobook gives that incredible example of a father trying to connect with his son who's frustrated with school.
Right.
Initially, the father tries all the wrong approaches, probing, advising, judging.
Right.
He's coming from his own perspective, his own autobiography, as Covey calls it, instead of truly trying to understand his son's experience.
It's such a common communication pattern, isn't it?
I know, right?
We often jump into problem-solving mode or try to offer advice before we've really taken the time to understand the other person's perspective.
And then the father shifts gears and starts practicing empathic listening.
Yes.
He puts aside his own agenda and focuses on simply trying to understand his son's feelings and experiences.
It's such a powerful shift.
Yeah.
Empathic listening isn't just about hearing the words.
Right.
It's about getting inside the other person's frame of reference.
Yeah.
Seeing the world through their eyes. It's about creating a space where they feel truly heard and understood.
And you can just feel the communication open up when the father makes that shift.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling judged or dismissed, the son feels seen and validated.
Exactly.
And from that place of understanding,
Yeah.
the father is finally able to offer support and guidance in a way that's actually helpful.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do in a conversation is simply to listen.
Yeah.
To really listen.
Yeah.
Without judgment, without interruption,
Right.
without trying to fix anything.
So much of effective communication boils down to that, doesn't it?
I think so.
And it's something we can all get better at with practice.
Absolutely.
Now on to habit 6. Synergize, where everything starts to come together.
This is where the magic happens.
I love it.
Covey emphasizes that synergy is about creating something new and better together.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
The audiobook uses that great example of the couple who are disagreeing about vacation plans.
Right.
They're stuck in a win-lose mindset.
Yeah.
Each trying to get their way.
But then they shift their approach.
Okay.
They start to truly listen to each other, to value the differences in their perspectives and desires. And through that process of open communication and creative brainstorming, they come up with a solution that neither of them had even considered before.
And that solution ends up being something that truly meets both of their needs. It's a win-win that wouldn't have been possible without that synergistic approach.
That's the power of synergy.
Yeah.
It's about leveraging our differences to create something greater than we could have achieved individually.
And this is something we can do in any area of our lives, in our families, in our workplaces, in our communities.
That's right.
It's about being open to new possibilities, valuing different perspectives, and collaborating to create something amazing together.
Absolutely. Synergy is all about embracing the power of we.
Yeah, and that brings us to the final habit, which is all about ensuring we can keep showing up fully to create that synergy with others. Habit 7, sharpen the saw.
So important.
So what does that mean exactly? What does it look like to sharpen the saw in our own lives?
Covey uses this analogy to talk about renewing ourselves in 4 key dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional.
So it's not just about working harder or being more productive, right?
Right.
It's about taking care of ourselves holistically so that we have the energy, resilience, and mental clarity to keep showing up as our best selves.
You got it. And he emphasizes that this isn't selfish.
Right.
It's actually essential for our effectiveness. If we're burnt out, stressed, and depleted, we can't possibly show up fully for ourselves or others.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So sharpening the saw means prioritizing activities that nourish and replenish us in each of those 4 dimensions.
That makes sense. So what are some examples of how we could sharpen the saw in each of these dimensions? What resonates with you most from what Covey shares about this habit?
Well, physically, it's about getting enough sleep, eating nourishing food, and moving our bodies in ways that feel good. Spiritually, it might be about connecting with nature, spending time in quiet reflection, or engaging in practices that nurture our sense of meaning and purpose.
Right.
Mentally, it's about challenging ourselves intellectually, learning new things, and keeping our minds sharp.
Okay.
And socially, emotionally, it's about building strong relationships,
Yeah.
contributing to our communities, and engaging in activities that bring us joy and connection.
And one of the most important things about Sharpen the Saw is that it's an ongoing process.
It is.
It's not something we do once and then check off our list. It's about consistently making time for these renewing activities, even when we're busy.
Absolutely. And that's where it connects back to the earlier habits.
Yeah.
Especially habit 3, put first things first.
Yeah.
We have to be intentional about scheduling time for Sharpen the Saw activities. Just like we would schedule any other important appointment.
Right.
Otherwise, they're likely to get squeezed out by the urgent but not important demands of our lives.
That's so true. It's so easy to let those self-care activities fall by the wayside when we're feeling overwhelmed.
It is.
But Covey reminds us that investing in ourselves is an investment in our effectiveness, our relationships, and our overall well-being. It's about recognizing that we're not machines.
That's right.
We're human beings who need to recharge and renew in order to thrive.
And that leads us to one of the quotes you share that really resonated with me. The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities.
Oh, that's so good.
That's such a powerful reminder that we have the power to shape our lives, to choose what matters most, and to make time for those things, even when life gets busy.
And on that note, I think it's a perfect time to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground, from paradigms and proactivity to the importance of principles and interdependence.
We have.
And we've started to explore some of those essential sharpen the saw activities that help us show up as our best selves.
As we move into part 2, we'll dive deeper into some specific strategies for applying these habits in your everyday life.
Okay.
We'll explore how to overcome common challenges, create lasting change, and truly unlock your potential for effectiveness.
So until next time, take a moment to reflect on what resonated most with you from today's discussion. What are some key takeaways that you're going to put into practice this week?
That's a great question for everyone to think about. Welcome back to our deep dives into Stephen Covey's 7 Habits.
It's amazing how much ground we covered in part 1. And yet there's still so much more to explore.
There is.
And as we were wrapping up part 1, you mentioned that quote about scheduling your priorities.
I've been thinking about that ever since. It's so easy to let our schedules dictate our lives instead of the other way around.
It's one of those quotes that really gets you thinking, isn't it? And it highlights the importance of being intentional. Not just about what we do, but about how we manage our time and energy.
Exactly. And it really ties into those first 3 habits, doesn't it? Being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first. It's all about taking control of our lives and shaping them according to our values and goals.
It's about moving from a reactive mindset to a proactive one, from feeling like we're constantly at the mercy of our circumstances to being the architects of our own lives.
I love that the architects of our own lives. It's such a powerful image.
It is.
And it reminds me of Covey's distinction between effectiveness and efficiency. We can be super efficient at climbing the ladder of success. But if it's leaning against the wrong wall, we're just getting to the wrong place faster. That's such a key point. We can be busy all day long checking things off our to-do lists. But if those activities aren't aligned with our values and goals, we're not truly being effective.
So it all comes back to that idea of beginning with the end in mind. What does success actually look like for us? What do we want our lives to stand for? What legacy do we want to leave behind?
Those are big questions. And answering them requires some serious introspection. It's about identifying our core values, defining our personal mission, and making sure that our daily actions are in alignment with that bigger vision.
And that's where habit 3, put first things first, comes into play, right?
Yeah.
It's about using tools like the time management matrix to make sure that we're spending our time and energy on those activities that truly matter. Not just the urgent ones, but the important ones.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing those quadrant 2 activities.
Yeah.
The ones that are important but not urgent. These are the activities that often get pushed aside when we're in reactive mode.
Yeah.
But they're the ones that ultimately contribute most to our long-term happiness and fulfillment.
Things like nurturing our relationships.
Yeah.
Taking care of our health, pursuing our passions, and planning for the future. It's so easy to let those things slide when we're caught up in the daily grind.
It is.
But they're essential for a truly fulfilling life.
And this is where that whole concept of sharpening the saw comes into play. We talked about it briefly in part 1, but it's worth revisiting.
Definitely. It's such a powerful metaphor for taking care of ourselves.
Yes.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
And it's not just about indulging ourselves or taking a break.
Right.
It's about investing in ourselves, in our capacity to produce, to contribute, to live a meaningful life.
Covey uses the analogy of the goose that lays the golden eggs.
Right.
If we just focus on getting the eggs, on maximizing our output in the short term, we'll eventually kill the goose. We'll burn ourselves out. But if we invest in the goose, if we take care of ourselves, we'll continue to reap the rewards for years to come.
It's a reminder that self-care isn't selfish.
Yeah.
It's actually essential for our long-term effectiveness.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to those principles we talked about earlier. Covey emphasizes that true effectiveness is built on a foundation of character, of living in alignment with timeless principles like integrity, fairness, honesty, and service.
He distinguishes between principles and values.
Okay.
Values are subjective.
Right.
They're what we deem important to us individually. Principles, on the other hand, are objective.
Okay.
They're like natural laws that govern human effectiveness.
So it's kind of like gravity. Whether we believe in gravity or not,
Exactly.
it still affects us.
Exactly. And Covey argues that the same is true for principles like fairness, integrity, and honesty. When we align our lives with these principles, we tap into a source of power and effectiveness that transcends our individual efforts.
It's like we're working with the grain of the universe rather than against it.
And this is where Covey's work goes beyond mere self-help. It's about understanding the deeper principles that govern human interaction, success, and fulfillment.
You know, there's that quote you sent over. Did you ever consider how ridiculous it would be to try to cram on a farm? To forget to plant in the spring, play all summer, and then cram in the fall to bring in the harvest?
Such a good one.
It's such a powerful analogy.
Yeah.
It reminds us that character development, like farming, is a process that requires consistent effort, patience, and a long-term perspective. We can't just expect to become virtuous overnight. We have to invest the time and effort to cultivate those qualities within ourselves.
It's about making those small daily choices that align with our values, even when no one's watching. It's about showing up with integrity even when it's difficult. It's about treating others with kindness and respect even when they don't deserve it.
And over time, those small choices add up to create a life of character and integrity. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's super fascinating. This idea of re-scripting. Covey talks about how we all have these scripts that we've inherited from our families, our cultures, and our experiences. These scripts are like unconscious programs that run in the background, influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
It's a really powerful concept.
It is.
And sometimes these scripts are helpful. They provide us with guidance, a sense of belonging, and a framework for navigating the world. But other times they can be limiting, even destructive. They can hold us back from reaching our full potential or prevent us from seeing things in new ways.
So how do we know if our scripts are serving us or holding us back? And more importantly, what can we do to change them if they're not working for us?
That's where the work of self-awareness comes in. We have to become aware of the scripts that are running in the background, to examine them, to question them, and to decide whether they're aligned with the person we want to be and the life we want to create. And if they're not, we can start to rewrite them.
So it's not about just accepting those inherited scripts as our fate, right? We actually have the power to change them, to create new scripts that are more aligned with our values and goals.
Exactly. And that process of re-scripting requires us to tap into our imagination, our creativity, and our willpower. It's about envisioning the person we want to become. And then making conscious choices that support that vision. It's about replacing those old limiting beliefs with new empowering ones.
It's about becoming the authors of our own lives, isn't it? And that leads us to another one of Covey's concepts that I've always found intriguing, the PPC balance.
It's a simple yet profound idea. The P stands for production, the desired results we want to achieve. And the PC stands for production capability, our ability to produce those results.
So it's not just about getting things done. It's about making sure that we're taking care of the machinery that allows us to get things done.
And Covey argues that we need to maintain a balance between these two. If we focus too much on production and neglect our production capability, we'll eventually burn out. We'll deplete our energy, our resources, and our motivation.
It's like running a car without ever changing the oil or getting a tune-up. Eventually, it's going to break down.
And it's the same with us. We need to invest in our physical health, our mental well-being, our relationships, our skills and knowledge. We need to sharpen the saw.
Now, bringing this back to you, the listener. What's one area of your life where you feel like you might be out of balance? Are you over-focused on production at the expense of your production capability? Are you neglecting certain areas of your life because they don't seem urgent? These are some really important questions to consider as we continue to explore these habits.
And remember, Covey's 7 habits aren't just a set of rules or techniques. They're a framework for thinking about our lives, for making choices that are aligned with our values, and for creating a life of meaning, purpose, and effectiveness.
And as we move into part 3 of our deep dive, we'll explore those last 3 habits. Think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and synergize in even greater depth. We'll uncover practical strategies for applying these habits in our interactions with others, for building stronger relationships, and for achieving extraordinary results together. Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive into the 7 habits.
It's hard to believe we're already at the final part.
I know, right?
Time flies when you're having fun.
And learning about effectiveness. So we've talked about those first 3 habits being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first.
Those are all about personal effectiveness.
Exactly. But the real magic starts to happen when we move beyond individual effectiveness and start thinking about how these principles apply to our interactions with others.
Absolutely. Habits 4, 5, and 6.
Think win-win, seek first to understand,
Then to be understood.
and synergize.
These are all about creating effective relationships and achieving extraordinary results together.
Okay, so let's start with habit 4. Think win-win. It's easy to fall into that win-lose mentality,
It is.
especially in competitive environments.
Right, especially in today's world where everyone's trying to get ahead.
But Covey argues that in most situations, a win-win solution is not only possible, but actually more beneficial in the long run.
It's about shifting from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Instead of seeing it as a fixed pie where someone has to lose for someone else to win.
Right.
It's about finding creative ways to expand the pie so everyone can benefit.
And that requires a fundamental shift in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's about moving from seeing others as competitors to seeing them as potential collaborators.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we can achieve more together than we ever could on our own. And that requires us to be both courageous and considerate.
Courageous in the sense that we have to be willing to stand up for our own needs and interests, and considerate in the sense that we have to be genuinely interested in understanding and respecting the needs and interests of others.
You nailed it. It's about finding solutions that benefit everyone involved, not just ourselves. And that leads us beautifully into habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Oh, this is a good one.
This is where empathic listening becomes so crucial.
It's about going beyond just hearing the words someone is saying and really trying to understand their perspective, their feelings, their underlying needs and motivations. Covey talks about this idea of listening with the intent to understand, rather than just waiting for our turn to speak or formulate our response.
And it's a skill that takes practice, doesn't it? It's so easy to get caught up in our own thoughts and assumptions, to filter everything through our own lens of experience. But to truly connect with others, we have to be willing to step outside of ourselves and see the world through their eyes.
I remember that example from the audiobook of the father trying to connect with his son who's struggling in school. Initially, the father tries to solve the problem, to give advice, to offer his own perspective. But it's not until he shifts gears and starts practicing empathic listening that the communication really opens up.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply to listen. To really listen without judgment, without interruption, without trying to fix anything. Just to be present and to create a space where the other person feels heard and understood.
And from that place of understanding, we can start to build trust, rapport, and connection. And that sets the stage for habit 6, synergize. This is where the magic happens.
This is where 1 + 1 = 3 or more.
Right. Covey says that synergy is about creating something new and better together. It's about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
The audiobook gives that great example of the business meeting, where the participants were initially stuck in their own perspectives, each defending their own ideas and solutions. But then they shift their approach. They start to truly listen to each other, to value the differences in their perspectives and experiences. And through that process of open communication and creative brainstorming, they come up with a solution that's far better than anything they could have come up with on their own.
That's what I love about this habit. It's about recognizing that we all have different strengths, different perspectives, different experiences. And when we come together with a spirit of collaboration and a willingness to learn from each other, we can create something truly extraordinary.
It's about tapping into the collective wisdom and creativity of the group. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the 7 habits, I'm curious, what's standing out to you, listener? What's resonating most deeply? What's one habit that you're feeling called to focus on or experiment with in your own life?
And remember, these habits aren't just about achieving external success. They're about developing our character, building strong relationships, and living a life of meaning and purpose. It's a journey, not a destination.
And as Covey reminds us, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. So what's one quadrant 2 activity that you're going to commit to scheduling this week? What's one step you can take today to move closer to the life you want to create?
The 7 habits provide a powerful roadmap for personal and interpersonal effectiveness. But it's up to each of us to take those principles and put them into practice in our own unique ways.
And remember, the journey of personal growth and development is an ongoing one. There's always more to learn, more to explore, more to become. But by consistently applying these principles, we can create lives of extraordinary effectiveness, fulfillment, and contribution. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.